Okay. Again, like I said earlier, antioxidants are such an important aspect of human health. But I would put them on a par with anti-inflammatories and golly, stress. Minimizing stress are some of the most important things for your health. And really, without much further ado, Dr. Summey is, to most of you, does not need any introduction. And so I'm just going to quickly hand over to Dr. Summey. And again, Dr. Summey, thank you so much for at such short notice making yourself available to do this webinar for us.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Dr. David. I want to just congratulate you and Sherry. I know Sherry is really kind of the wizard behind the scenes, and so we miss her, and so we know that it's really nice and you don't appreciate having the technical expertise, and she's kind of just such a big help when it comes to helping things run smooth. So if you guys notice a couple of rough edges, it's because it's us. we're trying to twist all the knobs and talk, and men don't multitask, I don't think, as well as women do sometimes. So
you're not going to tell them how I panicked just before the webinar.
No. That stays under the hat here.
Okay, I have a little secret.
I will spill my beans here on. I was scrambling around and at the last minute, making sure everything's doing good, polishing the slides, and you're going to see some roughness in a little bit. This is the first time I presented this one, and I said to David, I said, no, I don't like to cancel anything. This is an important enough topic. I'll do it myself. So this is 2 or 3 days worth of work, and I think it turned out pretty well. But I was throwing my vitamins in my mouth and drinking my water and all that, and I almost ate my microphone. I still had the headset on. So anyway, so thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you for these are so. From my perspective and listening to the speakers that you've had in the past, and I'm kind of speaking to the choir here. You all know, if you've been on one other webinar, that these are such good quality, and I just want to applaud you, Dr. David and Sherry, for having this platform to be able to get these dynamite webinars out there.
Thank you.
And so this is my one of my things I'm loving to do, and I didn't like public speaking, and this is not so scary because it's just me in my room here, but I do have a responsibility to provide the best information I can. My patients, for 30 years in my practice, they know that I'm pretty diligent in researching the information out, trying to pull out the truth and get to what's important. And so yeah, I've got a couple of things that when we send these slides out, for those of you or you have friends that, or if you're members and you want to come back and listen to this, there's going to be a few more slides added. I didn't get a chance to put just about maybe 3 or 4 slides, but they're very important slides, and so those are going to be added. And then the format is going to be slightly changed when I send my copies of these slides to David. So yeah, let's just jump right into this particular topic is super antioxidants, and I saw that on the plan on the board, and I said, no, we can't change that. We've got to do this. And being in a wellness center and putting together a multiple disciplinary group, it's important to work together, and that's kind of what antioxidants do. They work together, and so I'm going to jump right into what this webinar is not. Now, that's kind of a different way to start, but I realized that it was quite a daunting exercise, and all the volume and books and books and books that I had access to, it's not an expose. It by no means is this going to be an exhaustive expose on all the antioxidants. It's not going to be a biochemical lesson, although there are going to be some biochemical terms, and we're going to do a test at the end. The test is to see if you can stay awake during the whole webinar. But no, I'm just kidding about that. The complete list of we're not going to have a list of all the best food antioxidants. I had to be little bit discriminatory and just pick some of the things that I thought that would be interesting. That's something that maybe for those of you who are wellness coaches and healthcare providers, something that you can learn. It's not going to be a battle of who's got the biggest ORAC score, oxygen radical absorption capacity. That's one test to test the effectiveness of an antioxidant. But one of the things that really kind of bothered me was some of these antioxidant companies would come out and say, well, ours is 17,000. Well, ours is 34,000. Well, ours is 60,000. Ours is 100 and some thousand. And it's like, well, what kind of volume are you talking about? And some of these would say, well, it's a month's supply, or somebody said, well, it's a whole week's supply, and it's very misleading when you start throwing these numbers out there. And so there's a lot of marketing hype and that type of thing that's out there on what this this particular number means. So we're really not going to go into that. I don't want to get terribly off track in that regard. It's not a sales job on who's got the best supplements. You guys have probably already gone out there, and all you got to do is type in one of the search boxes, antioxidants, and you got millions and millions of hits and probably thousands of companies that are trying to sell you what they believe is the best one out there. So what really this webinar is my opinion. And yes, there's some good credibility. There's some good research that we'll pull forward. But it's what I've learned through my clinical experience and some of the practical experience and just where I'm at this point. Before we really get into the meat and the heart of the webinar, Arthur Schopenhauer, I did about 8 years of lecturing for a couple different companies, and I love this quote. He was a German philosopher, and when you look at this topic, this title of this slide, all new ideas, most new ideas, I had all, but it's probably not true. Most new ideas go through these three phases. When you think about when they saw that they thought the Earth was flat and no, it's round, and the Earth was the center of the universe, and it's not. There was thousands of people that actually got killed for the belief that it was different than everybody else's. So first, these new ideas are ridiculed. Sometimes they're violently opposed. And third, they're finally accepted as self-evident. And so one example, it's a book called Scurvy, How a Surgeon, a Mariner, a Gentleman Solved the Greatest Medical Mystery of the Age of the Sail. And from the 15th century to the 19th century, scurvy caused more deaths at sea than storm, shipwrecks, combat, and all the other diseases combined. And it was because of the failure to recognize just a simple thing that a ship's surgeon mate in the British Royal Navy, he showed that back in the year 1747 that this citrus fruit, it's a substance called rob, is a mixture of lemons, limes, and oranges. It was nasty taste and stuff, but apparently he found that it was very effective and it stopped this deadly disease. And but they didn't take him seriously because he couldn't explain it, and it kind of came from outside the box, so to speak. And it wasn't until about 150 years later that they incorporated this daily ration of lemon juice on all the ships, and that's where the term limeys came from. And the failure, they believe, may have been the reason for Britain's defeat in the American Revolution. Ascorbic acid was actually isolated about 100 years later, and then it was accepted, and it enabled them to continue to keep their sailors healthy. And that's one of the reasons why they have the strongest, healthiest fleet on the planet at that time, and they were able to then defeat Napoleon at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. So there's a little interesting tidbit about a really well-known, we're not going to go into a lot of detail about something as simple as ascorbic acid. It's so easy I mean, it's all over the literature, and everybody knows it's a very well-established antioxidant. So let's do a first type of thing. In order to understand the antioxidant, we first must understand why we need them, how important they are to our health and well-being. So how do we live on this planet? We know that there's so many toxins out there. Dr. Steve Nugent, one of the top naturopaths in the country, wrote a book called How to Survive on a Toxic Planet. So we know that life in this century is full of pollutants, and these pollutants that are in our air, food, and water can overtax our detoxification systems, and it starts to do strange thing that starts to inhibit our immune function, which is directly linked to just about every disease out there. And there's another complicating factor, and it's a new word that a lot of people are not familiar with. It's called polypharmacy. And we all know that poly means many. And so there are some MDs that are very good about not doing this, but there's a lot of others that are just continuing to not be aware of other medications that a person is on. I had a woman come in. She was on 20 prescriptions, about 54 years old, 20 prescription pharmaceuticals. And obviously she was feeling terrible, and I told her, you need to go back to your doctor and reveal all these other drugs that you're on, and you need to let him know your intention. And we put her on a simple nutrition program. She was able, within about a month's time, able to get off of half of those, and within another 2 weeks' time, was able to cut down the amounts of those 10. So, needless to say, she was feeling like a different person. But our body.
Doc, sorry to interrupt, but 20. I mean, how do you explain to people how to get off 20? I mean, most of them they feel they really need to use all 20, right? So, I mean, how do you start to even explain that?
She started to understand who I was and what I was about. You know, I'm first of all an educator, and I kind of, you know, sometimes I'm a little strange sense of humor, but I said, after I heard all these drugs that she was on, and I saw how terrible she was feeling, I said, hey, do you think the 21st drug is going to really do the trick and it's going to help all the other ones do the job? She said, no, I'm sick of this. So she was, you know, she obviously came to me. A lot of people come to chiropractors because they know they're not going to get another drug. And so anyway, but the systems just get overwhelmed, and people do. And I want to be very clear. I tell my people, and I'm going to say it exactly the way I say it to all of my patients. I didn't put you on these drugs. I'm not going to take you off of any drugs. That's not my job. That's between you and your doctor. It's my job to get enough good information into your brain and get enough wellness in your body that you don't need those drugs. Isn't that what you and your doctor who prescribed them, isn't that what what he would want? Isn't that what you and he would want? And everybody says, oh, yeah, yes. And yet they realize that, gee, you know, they haven't taken them off of too many drugs in the last year and a half. So I don't ever want to jeopardize a person's relationship with their physician if they have a good relationship. But I always tell them, go back and say, you know what, it's my intention to be able to get off as many as I possibly can. You know, there's certain things like thyroid and things like that you just simply can't get off of.
Right.
But if you have had thyroid surgery and etc. So,
right. Doc, just one more thing, please. Some people are complaining that they can't hear, there's no audio. Folks, if you can you just respond in the chat box and let us know if you can hear or whether you can't. Just type in something real quick. We hate to do a whole presentation without anybody hearing what we're saying. That would be.
That's true. Are you hearing me okay, Dr. David?
I'm hearing you very clearly. So, but we just had a couple of people in the box. Okay, yes, can hear fine. I can hear.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Good. So, do you think that it may be their system and they need to go off of it and come back on, or
that would be
it's just their.
That would be a good thing to do. So if you have a problem, you probably won't be able to hear me, but I'll type it in. If you have a problem, just get off and come back in. All right, I'm going to let you keep going. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So, you know, how bad can this problem be? You know, you were trying to hit on this, you know, this, and of course when we started getting up into the 60, 65 population, it's only 12% of the population, but yet it's 32% of prescriptions. The average person over 65 is taking somewhere between 2 and 6 prescription drugs, 1 to 3 or 4 over-the-counter medications. Now, this is shocking. The average American in 1992 spent $600 a year, and 8 years later, they were spending twice that, $1,200. And it's projected now for 2010 that it's going to be $2,810 just for prescriptions. That's not over-the-counter. It's a 403% increase that's projected for this year.
Wow.
And they tend to be pretty conservative on these projections. So that's a shocking statistic, and I just pulled that off just like today. And so some of these I've tried to put in my some type of source, and if you need to know some of the sources, then you can either email me or text them. I'll have my contact information at the end. So here's the Kaiser Foundation, the Commonwealth Fund, and Tufts New England Medical Center. They talked about seniors with 3 chronic conditions. Nearly 3 of 4, or 73%, take 5 or more medications regularly. The number of different meds a person takes tends to increase with age. At 75 years of age, people are taking an average of 8 drugs, 7.9 drugs per person per day. That's the American Pharmacists Association. And when I have been in practice over the 30 years, what I've noticed is in the early years, we'd get very quick results. And I stopped getting I shouldn't say I stopped. I started noticing that the results are not coming as quickly for patients of mine that want to just eliminate some simple back and joint and muscle pain. And so I start asking them more questions about what's their prescriptions, what are they taking. And one of the #1 things that I've come up with people that are slow in responding is Lipitor, or the statin drugs, because it blocks the muscles' ability to heal itself, to recover. It's blocking the building block for the hormone testosterone, which is what helps us maintain our muscle mass. Women and men need testosterone, and cholesterol is the main building block for that hormone. So I would say to them, go back to your doctor and tell them you might be having some problems. Is it okay if you go off the drug for a couple weeks? And many of them come back and they say within 2 weeks, if they hadn't been, let's say maybe 15% progress, improvement over the period of 6 weeks, that's way too slow. And within 10 days, they're coming back and they're saying, I'm 60% better. Because oftentimes that pharmaceutical is slowing down the body's ability to recover. In this case, it's muscle. There's some pretty serious muscle side effects with that particular one. But okay, so let's move forward. 85,000 chemicals have been introduced into our environment since World War II. This is according to Dr. Steve Nugent, How to Survive on a Toxic Planet. What they do is they increase our reactive oxygen species, or what they call these pro-oxidants, and they deplete the antioxidants in all living cells. One of the major things that happens in long-term side effects is the damage that's inflicted on our DNA. And that leads to cellular degeneration, degradation, and accelerated aging. DNA, if it starts to degrade, it's replicating itself. And if the next copy isn't as good, and the cells continue to copy themselves, which is one of the purposes of the DNA, and it's like making a bad copy of a bad copy of a bad copy. Pretty soon it degrades pretty bad, and you don't survive that. And so, and we're going to learn a little bit more about longevity with the antioxidants. So this thing called oxidative stress, what's another word for that? It's rust. And that's called oxidation. And metal will do that in your car, and if you put an undercoating on that, it'll protect it. So it'll keep the oxygen, the water from getting to that, and creating these problems of this shift. And so I got to shut my phone off here because it's ringing. So, okay, so this oxidative stress is actually caused by an imbalance between the production of these reactive oxygen species and a biological system's ability to react, to readily detoxify these intermediates that repair the damage. So the problem is your body's not keeping up with the damage, and all forms of life have to maintain this reducing state. We call it a redox, the redox state, which is oxidation reduction. And so this is one of the keys to a antioxidant, is it actually provides a paired electron that helps to suppress that free radical in this inflammatory problem. And that's what we lead right into. These molecules, these atoms or ions that are called free radicals, there's an unpaired electron, and it makes them highly unstable, highly reactive, and they start to steal electrons from other tissues, and they damage tissues in the meantime, and that's called free radical damage. They all play an important role in physical chemistry, like the one I suggested to you on the metal. That's an oxidative stress problem. but it also is very important in our biochemistry and some of these other processes in human physiology, protein structure and so on. So if your structure gets damaged, you're going to have a hard time functioning, and particularly in the DNA. So these substances called reactive oxygen species, one example is superoxide dismutase nitric oxide. They regulate a lot of these biological processes, such as controlling vascular tone. So it can, we know that a few months ago, the Nobel Prize was won in this process of nitric oxide being able to open up and dilate. But these substances can also become weak free radicals, and so they have to have the family of antioxidants to soak some of that free radical damage that's going. So reactive oxygen species are used in the cell signaling process as well, and it's called the redox signaling. And that's something that I've been lecturing on for about 8 years on this cell surface signaling process. The cellular communication system is so important, and when you start interfering with that with oxidative stress, you've got problems. So we know that disturbances in this ability of the body to balance these reactive oxygen species and these free radicals can start damaging all components of the cell membrane, the proteins, the lipids that are comprised of that make this lipid or that make this membrane up, and it can get all the way down into and including the cell nucleus, which is where the DNA is. Okay, so what can we do? What are some steps that we can do? Well, you know, I congratulate those of you who are on this call or are listening to the recording of the call because you're getting educated. We need to build strength, and we do that through knowledge, and it's mind, body, spirit. We need to surround ourselves with good sources, good people. One of the things that we talked about just last week was how to be able to connect our heart and our mind, and that's stress reduction, and that we're going to talk about in just a second here. But we need to understand some of these things and, you know, read the labels and be able to stay away from as many of these weird additives and these strange things that are coming at us from all different directions. So, okay, I want you to take a breath. I'm real famous for you know, changing your posture, making sure you're sitting up. I'm a chiropractor. You know, pay attention to your posture. Bring your shoulders back. Breathe. Take a couple of deep breaths. We need to move more. We need to get more exercise. These are 5 key things to improving performance, and they'll improve safety at work and improve performance in children and learning and so many things that are important with these 5 things. So we need to be moving more, and that'll cause us to breathe more. Well, that's going to move more oxygen in and out, which, you know, that's good, but it also creates oxidative stress. So we need to, you know, soak up some of those things with good foods, good antioxidants. Second thing, though, we need for life is many times we need to increase our H2O, our water. The right amount is about half our body weight in ounces of water. And the foods need to be in proper ratio, protein, carbs, and fats. I love the Genetic Key program where we all have a different genetic background, and so if you're trying to force too much carbohydrates, for example, if you're in a particular metabolic category, you're going to create problems. And so anyway, so that's important to know, and if you want to know more about that, we can route you to the proper source for somebody that's Genetic Key trained. Just real simple. It's a 3-page questionnaire, and then you find out what your metabolic type is, and you get a pie graph, and there it is right there. There's your ratio according to the 5 different genetic types. Used to be 12 different, I think it was 14 different genetic types, and there was a 500-page questionnaire, and there was a lot of blood work. It was pretty expensive and time-consuming, and a lot of people have worked on this program and brought it down to a pretty simple process. This is one of the things that Priscilla does in our office. And then we need to do some supplementation in an intelligent way. We know that antioxidants work like families should work together. and oftentimes they support each other. And when an antioxidant gives up electrons, which is really what it's doing, it's giving up electrons to soak up those free radicals that are trying to do damage. Well, it becomes a free radical in many cases. There's some exceptions to that. We'll talk about those. Central nervous system and autonomic nervous system balance. And that's where chiropractic or stress reduction, massage therapy, those are very important. That's what chiropractors are attempting to do, is balance the autonomic nervous system and balance your central nervous system and help the communication process between your brain, your spinal cord, and the rest of the body. So let's go into the antioxidants now. There's 4 internal, what we call endogenous antioxidants that have had more study than any of them. GSH is abbreviation for glutathione, superoxide dismutase, SOD, catalase, and then CoQ10. I know there's a whole bunch more out there, and I apologize if I don't talk about your favorite antioxidant. There's some of them that are newer that are looking very promising, like, for example, resveratrol. That's a wonderful antioxidant. And so, again, it's not an all-inclusive, totally exhaustive study on antioxidants. We're just going to hit on probably just the surface, just kind of skim the surface. So we know that superoxide dismutase, it actually takes apart and works in this process we call it dismutate the superoxide and the hydroxyl ion, and it protects us from these damaging hydrogen peroxide, turns them actually to less damaging hydrogen peroxide and oxygen. But it's present in all living aerobic organisms that use oxygen, and most all subcellular compartments that generate or activated oxygen. It's been assumed that this superoxide dismutase plays a very central role in the defense against oxidative stress. So again, all you got to do is just go to Medline. I wouldn't go to Google necessarily, because again, there's going to be 1,500 companies that are going to say, oh, we've got the best this and the best that. So go to the Medline sources, National Academy of Sciences. Yeah, I've got a reference, I think, later on for that. Here's an artist's rendition of what a 3D picture, obviously of the electron scanning micrograph of what this molecule looks like. And these molecules are very particular in terms of their structure, and their structure affects their function. And so I thought I'd throw a few of those in there just to kind of give you a little bit of substance on that. There's going to be 1 or 2 of them that it's a little bit drier chemical a picture of this. But the next one is an enzyme called catalase. And it's actually an iron-containing or heme-containing. Hemoglobin is the molecule that carries the oxygen, and it's iron. So we all hear about the iron deficiency anemia. If you can't produce a good structure red blood cell, then you're not going to carry oxygen to your tissues. Or if a person's got a disturbance of the shape and the structure of the red blood cell called sickle cell anemia, those are major problems. And there's a lot of oxidative stress that goes on in those type of individuals. But again, this catalase actually is like a catalyst in the separation of this hydrogen peroxide, and it turns it into water and oxygen. I think I incorrectly stated that before. Hydrogen peroxide is very damaging, and this particular enzyme can separate that into harmless water and oxygen. And so one of the first enzymes to be isolated in a purified state. It actually has these 4 long polypeptide chains. Polypeptides are just amino acids connected together like strings of a pearl. It's the simplest organic bond out there, but it's 500 amino acids long. And it looks kind of like this, like a big mess of ribbons that are just all bundled together. But it's incredible when you look at the fact that this is one of the most powerful things that helps protect us from these damaging free radicals. It happens to be located in a little cellular organelle called the peroxisome. It's got one of the highest capabilities to be able to soak up millions of molecules of these free radicals. And hydrogen peroxide is probably one of the most damaging free radicals. to be able to convert it to safe oxygen and water. So it does that just within a second. I mean, millions. It's incredible because it's got so many of these extra electrons that it can use as a donator. We know that hydrogen peroxide is an important thing because our cells use it to kill off bacteria or when a pathogen comes in. But the problem is we need to then detoxify that and get rid of the cellular kind of like it's like a spent weapon that you know, use to kill the bacteria. But then now you've got some potential damaging substances that your body's got to clean up. Now this is an interesting thing. I think a lot of people we've heard that having gray hair, that's not my problem. My problem is just keeping enough of it around. Having gray hair, you know, we think, well, you get scared. Well, if you're scared or stressed for a long enough period of time, that can decrease your catalase. You know, stress, oxidative stress, is going to use up your catalase, and so we're all producing hydrogen peroxide, right? That's just a natural process produced by the body. And if there's a dip, we all know when you bleach your hair, what are you bleaching it with? Hydrogen peroxide, right? What does that do to the hair? It turns it white. And so you cannot break down the hydrogen peroxide that our body is generating, and so it'll start to bleach that hair from the inside out. So they're starting to look at some interesting things that I know my brother and I are only two years apart, and I do a lot better job, I think, of taking care of myself from an antioxidant standpoint, and I have a few, maybe 5%. My brother's like, you know, 90% gray, and we are from the same parents. So, okay, CoQ10. It's known as ubiquinone. It's a component of this electron transport chain that it participates in the oxygen respiration process, and it generates energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, which is the basic energy package of all of our cells. So 95% of our energy is generated in this way. It's a very high concentration in the heart and the liver. It's depleted by statins. Most people know that. So if you're on statins, I would actually have you read a book that a flight surgeon wrote, and he was an MD that went up to the space shuttle, or the space station rather, went on the shuttle to the space station, and he had a little bit of a cholesterol issue, so his doctor put him on statins, and he said that killed him. And he did an article, that actually wrote a book, The Misguided Cholesterol Controversy, because, as I mentioned before, cholesterol is the main component, the building block for most of the neurochemicals in our brain, for the protective myelin sheath that protects all of our nerves, our peripheral nerves. It's the main component to most of the sex hormones and the hormone testosterone that helps to repair muscle, and you know, on and on and on. So beta blockers can also deplete CoQ10. After 20, our CoQ10 starts to deplete. Ultraviolet exposure reduces skin CoQ10 levels. It's also destroyed by frying foods. It decreases by 14, somewhere in the 14 to 32%. And there's kind of a picture. I think I kind of like them visual. I like to see what the structure of that particular molecule is. And okay, so I mentioned at the very beginning, this is not a talk about all the good. There's some dynamite lists out there of superfoods, and you can all go on the internet and you can see what we need to get these superfoods. We have to have good foods. You cannot get along, you cannot get by with a bad diet and taking good supplements. It just doesn't work. It's kind of like trying to run your car on fuel additive. You got to have the fuel in there, and then you add the fuel additive to bring the octane up to a high enough level, so then your engine's going to not, you know, run on and knock, and so you can't run your engine on fuel additive, and that's kind of like these antioxidants and these vitamins and minerals and all that. So what about foods? Okay, I'll put one slide in about foods, and you know, I love the chocolate thing too. So there you go. There's you can let your mouth water. The chocolate covered strawberries. Well, are these healthy? Well, you know, it depends on how many you eat. But interestingly enough, the I said I wasn't going to go into a lot, and I'm not. This is the only slide I have on the ORAC value. But isn't it interesting that 3.5 ounces of unprocessed cocoa powder is 26,000 on the ORAC score? And of course, then there's the acai, and there's the blueberries are way up there as well. And so, anyway, I thought I'd include that just to get some food in there. Okay. Our cells produce, and this is why I will talk a little bit about the juices. There's so many of them out there, and I'm not saying anything good or bad about the juices, because I tell you what, in fact, I had a lady come in today that she was really turned on about the particular company and the juice, the exotic beverage that they were producing, and I said, good for you. You know, you're getting good results. You're feeling better. Good for you. Stay after it. You know, you might want to attend a webinar like this and learn a couple of other things, and you can't do everything. It would be too time-consuming, too expensive, and there was one point where I thought I could take enough supplements to make up for my bad diet. That didn't work so good. That was like 15 years ago, and I was literally taking a handful of things. I knew my diet wasn't that great, and I said, you know what, I better start just going back to the basics and doing as good as I can. We can't be perfect on our diet because we know the soils are depleted, and etc. But one of the things I started researching was this molecule called glutathione. It's the most abundant and important intracellular antioxidant within our cells. It's made up of glutamine, cysteine, and glycine. They call it a tripeptide. Those are amino acids that are linked up. And it can be made in most cells. You just have to have the components. It's this intracellular glutathione synthesis, the biosynthesis of this, can be upregulated as a protective mechanism. So that's the key right there. Most of our cells make it, and here's a key. You know, if you don't get a particular supplement or a juice or a vitamin or mineral, most of us are going to continue to live. If your glutathione gets depleted too low, you die. Your cells die, and you'll see that how important this one is later on. It's involved in many biologic processes, including the detoxification of these xenobiotics. We talked about a few of them, these pharmaceuticals, but antibiotics and also environmental toxins that we're all being exposed to. It helps remove these free radicals from every cell, every tissue in the body. It helps with this oxidation reduction state, and it helps with the transfer of these electrons. And what's unique about, several things are unique about glutathione is it recycles itself, and it does not become a weak free radical like most all the other ones do. It's important in this protein sulfhydryl group, and that's really important in maintaining the structural integrity of these connective tissues. So if you're not getting, if you're depleting your body of glutathione, if you've got a lot of oxidative stress, maybe smoking, and even working in a polluted environment, and just not doing a good job of getting a good diet, oftentimes, and depending on your age and your other stress factors, you could be depleting this, and then you're going to start running into problems with damage to the proteins, damage to the membranes on the cell wall, and all the way down to the DNA. It's important in regulation of immune function. It helps maintain our T cells that are produced in the thymus, right underneath the sternum or chest bone. It activates, maintains and activates these T cells, and this process that's called phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is actually the process of the immune cells being able to engulf bacteria and viruses, and so they measure it in terms of how many they can engulf in 1 hour. Also maintains the balance between the helper cells, 1, interleukin 2, interleukin 12, gamma interferon, tumor necrosis factor. It helps with cytokine response. Cytokines are inflammatory in the inflammatory response pattern, and so very important in helping to control that. If you only have somewhere between 10 and 40%, which another translation of that is if you're between 30 and 50 years of age, if you have a reduction, which is not uncommon, it can completely deactivate these T cells. So I'm not just saying just getting older alone will do this, but if you have other stress factors that are going on, you'll see a chart pretty soon that will show some of the research on how glutathione gets depleted. It's the most abundant thiol, which is actually defined as a sulfur-containing substance. Now, just to give you a little bit of substance on that, this mercaptan is a thiol that smells like rotten eggs, and the natural gas is odorless and colorless, but when they add this mercaptan to it, then you know if you've got a natural gas leak, and that's just a little bit of substance on what that thiol is. That's a particular another one. This happens to be the most abundant one in the body. It provides the #1 major antioxidant defense mechanism in all mammal cells. Helps neutralize toxic peroxides, as we mentioned, which are byproducts of oxygen metabolism. So if you're out there exercising, you've got this oxygen metabolism that is really starting to get up into a high gear. Well, you're also producing a lot of these peroxides, and so your oxidative stress can start going up. Now, that's kind of ironic because you're doing a better job of taking care of yourself and getting out there and working out, but you just want to make sure that you're getting lots of these good superfoods, antioxidant foods, and maybe even add some glutathione to help, or add some components to it to help accelerate your glutathione production. That brings up that, I tell people they could go to the local health food store and they'll see a bottle of glutathione. It says glutathione right on the bottle. It does not absorb well. The molecule is too large. First of all, it doesn't get past the stomach acid, so it's already starting to get broken down. And then if it even did get inside the like an IV or something like this, then you're just not going to absorb it very well. It's too large of a molecule to transport across that membrane, the cell membrane. And that's kind of what it looks like from an artist rendition, and some of these tripeptides that are connected together. It's actually fat and water soluble, so it has antioxidant activity throughout the entire body. That's a real key factor that makes this one a special one. And here's a little bit more of a, from a chemist's point of view, a schematic diagram of what glutathione looks like. Okay, so let's talk about how this particular one depletes. First, the thing I think is real important, and I may not have it in here, glutathione helps to recycle vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin E. So those are antioxidants that are very important, and when those antioxidants give up an electron to soak up these free radicals and make them less damaging, like the peroxides that turn into water and oxygen, that antioxidant actually becomes a weak free radical itself, and you've got to do something about that. Well, that's what glutathione is there for. That's why they call it the master antioxidant. They suggest that about 50 years of age, our glutathione levels are down by about 50% of what they should be, and by 80 years old, we're totally depleted, and oftentimes that's why most people don't live. Majority of people don't live past 80 because they've been depleted at such a low level that their cells just can't repair themselves. And that depletion and that damage, free radical damage, again goes all the way down to, it includes the DNA. This is that talk I talked about. The stress depletes the glutathione at various speeds depending on how many and the severity of our stressors and multiple factors, environmental pollutants. I guess diet is included in lifestyle, but the amount of junk food, and if you smoke and things like that, how many medications you're on, if you have a disease process, that type of thing. So what's the result of low levels of glutathione? Now, just to give you a little bit of if you're thinking about measuring your glutathione, you can do that. The best way is to measure your erythrocyte, your red blood cell glutathione, and some of the laboratories are actually starting to do it. It's kind of, we're back in the stage where at one time they used to only test cholesterol, and then they started testing automatically HDL and LDL. Well, that's kind of where we're at right now. Still a little pricey. Most laboratories that are testing for glutathione levels are doing it just from an experimental standpoint. It's pretty accurate, but again, it's a little pricey. And so we know, though, that low levels, when you look at studies, they show that people with cardiovascular disease, cancer, AIDS, autism, alcoholism, these debilitating neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and some of these chronic retention of these potential toxic elements. Some of us have buildup. We can't get rid of these. Mercury, lead, arsenic, cadmium, manganese, and iron. One of the things that iron is a very common thing. Toxic levels of iron. Wilson's disease is one problem, and hemochromatosis is another one. After a woman is done menstruating, as she's going into menopause, oftentimes she needs more iron back during those younger years, but she doesn't need it so much later on. But that iron sometimes can build up and become toxic and be the source of a lot of free radicals. And remember that rust analogy. There's a lot of oxidative stress when there's a heavy metal like iron floating around the system. So, and I mentioned the environmental chemicals and drugs that sometimes will start to accumulate and build up. You can measure that, by the way, with a simple trace mineral analysis. It's called hair analysis. There's a company called Doctors Data Incorporated. I don't have that in my slide, but that's if you're concerned because of exposure to some of these metals, that's not a bad idea. You can they're in Illinois, and I may put that on a slide as I send those back to David to give you guys a reference of that those of you who are going to listen to this again or at a later date. So this is where we talked about the red blood cell or erythrocyte glutathione levels can be depleted if a person is just drinking moderate alcohol, if they're smoking, if they do regular exercise. You can actually deplete the body trying to do something good for yourself. And of course, the acute exposures to some of these toxic metals can be a problem as well. So it's very important that we try and provide the body with some of these key nutrients that are involved in the glutathione synthesis in order to sustain the functionally appropriate levels of glutathione. Now, I'm not going to read all these, but there's a kind of a short list of some of the medical conditions that are associated with low glutathione levels. Excuse me one second. So, okay, that's enough of that. Now, this is real important for those of you who, and again, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying to not take Tylenol, but it's the #1 cause of acute liver failure in the United States, acetaminophen. The FDA has not, in my opinion, and in Dr. Mercola's opinion, he's the #1 website on the planet, put a strong enough warning out there. Some people, if you remember a few years ago, they had a couple glasses of wine, and they happened to have like a headache or so, maybe before they drank the wine and they took some Tylenol. They had a bad reaction. It killed them. And the reason is because it depleted the liver's glutathione and exhausted it. When you go into the emergency room of any hospital in this country and you go in with either acute alcohol poisoning or acetaminophen toxicity, they'll put you on a substance called N-acetylcysteine, which is the main limiting amino acid in glutathione. So really what they're trying to do is accelerate your glutathione production because the liver can get depleted, and if it gets completely depleted, you're dead. So this is an important topic, and so my thinking is, and hey, I don't not take this. I take it periodically. When I had a major injury, I took it because I wasn't sleeping. I was in a lot of pain, and but yet I also was taking some protective things to help protect my liver because I know that there's some risks involved in that. So this acetaminophen is now found in more than 200 over-the-counter cold, flu remedies, and it's the #1 most common painkiller in the United States. I'm just going to talk briefly on HIV. Glutathione levels have been found. This is, if you want to go on Medline, you're welcome to do that. It's out there all over the place in terms of documenting what happens when the immune system drops down. Is it kind of like the chicken or the egg? Is it that the glutathione has depleted and therefore the immune system drops, or vice versa? And my thoughts are it doesn't matter. Both of them are happening. Glutathione levels drop off, and that actually triggers this human immunosuppressive virus to be able to go into this full-blown AIDS. There's a couple studies out there. This particular one took place in the Laboratory of Human Nutrition and Clinical Research in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And they took healthy adults and they actually looked at their glutathione levels, and they wanted to find out, could we achieve an effective and safe level or manipulation of the tissue and organ glutathione levels through some of these alternative strategies providing precursors of this glutathione. and they're studying it. They're continuing to studying it. Now that tells me that there's some pretty top places that are wanting to know exactly what are the benefits. They didn't really talk about the results of this study, but you can look at other websites and you can see some pretty amazing results. And there's a lot of laboratory studies. I think there's now over 80-some thousand peer-reviewed. I think I've got a slide on that in terms of just how prevalent this particular critical molecule is. That also, by the way, again, reminding you that it helps to recycle a lot of the other antioxidants in the system. And so it's a really big helper. And so this particular study was supported by NIH grants and grants and aids from Shriners Hospital Children for Children and the Anesthesia Foundation for Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Now, Dr. David, we talked a little bit about longevity. This is a woman who studies longevity. She studies sickness and disease, and they call these people epidemiologists. Dr. Maria Julius is at the University of Michigan, and she said, quoting, "Your blood levels of glutathione tell you the difference between your chronological age, your age that I'm 55, and your functional age. I feel a lot younger than my real age, and sometimes I have to remind myself, especially when I'm doing climbing in the mountains and doing some cross-country skiing and snowshoeing, that I better be thinking about going off of that cliff or going up that ridge and on. Those who have the highest glutathione levels are typically healthier and younger. They're functionally younger, and so yeah, just that one example of depletion of glutathione levels with some of the pharmaceuticals is enough to say, okay, you know what, I think I need to be investigating ways of getting this one higher, this particular master antioxidant. So I kind of started, and I did a little Medline search on glutathione depletion in cancer, glutathione depletion in neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, my mind's blank right now, and but there's a number of them out there, multiple sclerosis, etc., and inflammation, glutathione and inflammation. There was 2,305 references in the National Library of Medicine. That's a branch of the National Institute of Health. Glutathione depletion, that was a big one. There were 6,000 articles, 6,322. This enzyme is called glutathione reductase that helps to keep these electrons, keep these free radicals down. Actually, it helps to donate electrons and helps to recycle glutathione, and it keeps it from becoming a free radical. There was 10,000 references, and they're not trying to sell you anything. These are very reputable scientific articles that are and citations that are talking about the scientific benefit of these particular, whatever you want to plug in there. Then it's not going. They're not like Google. You're going to see tons of articles that are wanting to sell you things. Total in 1997, Medline articles on glutathione was 66,000. I just did this last night on Medline, and there's close to 90,000 medical citations and articles on glutathione. And we could have done the same thing with your favorite antioxidant because they're studying most of them. And I think a lot of universities and a lot of people that are really interested in truly helping us with our health and wellness are wanting to understand how we can get some of these processes under control that are leading to our country literally going downhill when it comes to health and wellness. So glutathione doesn't come from a bottle. If it says that on the bottle, you need to set it back down on the shelf and walk away from it. It doesn't come from a juice. There may be components in the juices and in some of these bottles that lead to the production of glutathione. But if somebody's trying to sell you on a product that says, yes, this is glutathione, you're literally wasting your money. So as you're understanding our cells produce it, we know that lots of research out there shows that as we get different components, one example would be undenatured whey protein. It's got a number of amino acids in there. It's one of the best, highest net protein utilization of any protein. And there's a lot of different fractions, different qualities of undenatured whey protein. Whey protein has been proven to raise glutathione levels. It doesn't raise it a lot, but it will raise it. So if a person is going to be supplementing with undenatured whey protein, you don't want to buy the cheapest one. You want to go maybe middle of the line. The highest ones just have a smaller molecular rate, and they've been purified a little bit more, and they typically absorb better. That's why they cost more. But these other synergistic nutrients will help, and it's been proven to raise both blood and also cellular, and they measure that by red blood cells, glutathione levels. So what are the components? Well, we talked about this N-acetylcysteine. It's just sometimes termed NAC. Alpha-lipoic acid, fatty acid, silymarin, which is a milk thistle. It's a good liver protector as well. It's been well known to do that. Well, why? Because it helps raise glutathione levels. By itself, it's not going to work as well as working in synergy. And so this is kind of like part of the team, but these are the biggest players. L-glutamine is the other one. So you've got these tripeptides that oftentimes need to be in that mix, but these things will assist your liver and assist your body in accelerating. We actually call it a glutathione accelerator. So the question then becomes, okay, I think and I'm encouraging you to go out there, do your own research. You'll be amazed at I mean, you saw the slides in terms of how many different Medline articles there were. So you can very easily get lost in the research. And so I'm just checking my time here. I think we're doing okay. So the question is, where do I get it from? Do I go to the health food store, or where do I get it? And that's one of the things that I started asking the questions too. In fact, I was up late nights just really getting into the research and looking at a couple of key researchers that have some tremendous credentials, and I just wanted to know, okay, well, these guys are a lot smarter than I. They have a lot more credentials. They've been studying glutathione for 40 years, and so I think, okay, I think I can learn something from this guy. His bibliography, his biography is like 25 pages. Dr. Robert Keller. Now, Dr. Keller traveled to Tanzania quite often doing volunteer work to help the people over there, and he succumbed to some type of a strange infection. I don't know if they ever knew what it was, and unfortunately he passed away a year ago. But when you look at the credentials, he's published over 100 articles and various scientific journal articles. The guy's triple board certified. The guy's got more credentials than just about any one doctor that I know of, any one medical physician that I've been associated with. So another couple, it's actually Dr. Herbert Nakasawa. He was involved in this company that was actually founded by research scientists. They have a pretty exclusive team that has been studying, again, for 40 years. Now, usually when you study, like vitamin C, for example, yeah, it took them a long time for the British sailors and for the world to accept that it was the ascorbic acid in the limes and the lemons and the oranges to accept that. But in terms of studying vitamin C, it doesn't take 40 years to figure that out. But this is the kind of a quest, kind of a process that's going on there. It's just opening up more and more things in terms of what all will this stuff do. And this particular gentleman, he's actually the one that came up with the fact that every hospital in the country needs to have N-acetylcysteine or some type of glutathione accelerator in order to save people's lives. If they're coming in and they've just overdosed on acetaminophen or alcohol or, heaven forbid, both, you better get that stuff in their system quickly or they're going to die. And so this gentleman has many patents. He's been, again, PhD and studying this particular biochemistry area. And so it's a pretty narrow area in a way. It's kind of like studying the bioactive sugars. It seems pretty narrow, But then when you get into it, it's like it opens up a whole world. And so again, the team that he's brought together, they actually were acquired by another company called Max that Dr. Keller, he was actually creating this glutathione for his patients. And he said, I see these patients. He's oncology trained, oncology qualified, just like Dr. David is oncology trained, MD, but he didn't practice oncology. But he saw these patients after they were getting through with treatment, and they were devastated. Their bodies were literally ravaged by the chemotherapy and the radiation and the surgeries that they had to go through. And he found out it was because they were being depleted of these very important antioxidants. And when the last antioxidant was used up, and it was a surprise to me, it's called same thing that we identify with gout, uric acid. Uric acid can be used as an antioxidant, but when uric acid is used up, the person's dead. That's the last substance that's used up before they pass away from this earth. But he said, instead of starting with the last ones, let's start with the first one. And of course, as you know, as we've now learned, that glutathione is the master antioxidant. It's the one that helps recycle all the other antioxidants and so on. So now Dr. Keller created this substance patent, and he found that when you add this proprietary formula and combine these things, it actually accelerates it almost 300% higher than what it normally would in our cells. And he's proven that through double-blind placebo-controlled studies. Now, a few steps above Dr. Keller is actually Dr. Nagasawa, because they've got 23 patents and patent pending, and they do also proprietary research. So that's being combined. And I tell you what, this company is just going to do some amazing things. And again, I'm not trying to sell you on a particular company, but when you start looking at the credibility and studying this for 40 years, he was the senior editor for the Journal of Medicinal Chemistry for 32 years. That's some pretty good credentials. Professor Emeritus in Medicinal Chemistry and Toxicology at University of Minnesota, et cetera, et cetera. So again, probably even a longer curriculum vitae and credentials is Dr. Keller, and his son is also a PhD, and is joining him now and with the research that they're doing together. So I love this chart because it gives you a good graphic and shows that at about 20 years of age, a lot of people kind of jokingly said, yeah, it's all downhill from 20 on. Well, I don't believe that. But on the average, if you're not doing anything, if you're not aware and protecting yourself from, number one, knowledge and surrounding yourselves with the things that we've been talking about, you're going to start succumbing to oxidative stress. And again, depending on where you're working, your location in the country and what you're exposing yourself to, etc., it's going to drop down. By the time we're about 50, it's about half. That's where I came up with these numbers, and this is what the research shows. And so we start this process that lasts the rest of our lives, typically, unless you're doing something to support adequate production of glutathione. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm taking a whole bunch of things, but I wasn't taking anything to support this particular one. And so this is interesting study. When you look at this, this GXL is actually called the glutathione accelerator. So before is the gray zone. When you look at normal, healthy people, okay, well, they're in a okay zone. But afterwards, then it's a 60-day time period, and it's measuring activity of lymphocytes, activity of this very important immune biomarker, lymphocytes. And you're looking at HIV patients. Look at how low those are. And again, this is pretty strong evidence. And when they go on this accelerator, it bumps them up, and oftentimes it prevents them from going into full-blown AIDS. And again, we've got to be very careful. We are not making any claims. This is not a disease claim that they're making. They're just saying, hey, these are the things that we know happens as a person goes downhill and starts to go into these disease conditions. So be very careful that we're not saying that this is curing anything. It's simply helping to provide the body with those things that it needs to sustain what it's supposed to be sustaining. But because of our 21st century, obviously we've been talking about all these things during this whole time. These things will deplete glutathione levels. So when you look at the patients with chronic viral illness, some of the other issues with chronic disease, you start seeing that they start out at a pretty low level, and oftentimes you can boost them up into quite effective levels. And again, this is a 60-day time period. That's where the double-blind placebo-controlled studies are relating to. So, okay, we're kind of winding down here. I've got to wrap up with a few things here. I wanted to give a couple of books. Dr. Keller's got a great little monograph, Glutathione, Your Best Defense Against Aging. Lester Packard, one of the best antioxidant books out there. And there's a number of books out there, so this is, again, not an all-exhaustive list. I'm sorry, it should be Earl, not Early. Dr. Earl Mendel. I'll fix that before I send it to Dr. David. What you should know about the super-antioxidant miracle, which we know is one of the things he talks about was glutathione. Now, here's some of the things that I'm going to be adding, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these individuals. I know Dr. David has had Barry Sears on. He wrote one of the last books that I've read of his. Now, if you remember, Dr. Sears was the gentleman that wrote the zone diets, keeping that blood sugar in the zone. And this anti-inflammation zone is a dynamite book, and he focuses a lot on the essential fatty acids, the fish oils, and these type of critical processes that can literally keep the inflammatory process down. And one of the problems is getting too many saturated fats. And what that does, it's saturated. What does that mean, saturated? It's too many hydroxyl ions, too many hydrogen ions, and you're creating a lot of free radicals, and so it's a problem when you have these saturated fats. So we need the unsaturated fats to be able to calm down this inflammatory process, and that's what he really focused on well. He says you can measure the pro-inflammatory and therefore the aging process with laser-like precision in just measuring your amount of EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, which is unsaturated fatty acid, and your saturated fats, and the arachidonic acid, or abbreviated AA. So it's a great little biomarker that you can look at, and the laboratory doesn't cost a lot of money to do that. So that's a real important work there. So the pieces that were missing, I just didn't have a chance, were some of the slides on inflammation, and I'm going to go through them just quickly right now, but just wanted to make sure that you knew who Richard Fleming was. He's a nuclear cardiologist, and we all know that cardiovascular disease is not a disease of too much cholesterol. It's not a disease of lack of statins. It's a disease of inflammation, and he talks about that, improves it over and over and over. So it's important to measure some of these biomarkers of inflammation and start to look at going on some anti-inflammatory foods, as well as some of the anti-inflammatory nutrients and the antioxidants that we've been talking about. Dr. Meggs, The Inflammation Cure, is another good book, and then Gene Carpenter, Stop Aging Now. So inflammation, let's just talk briefly. There's actually 3 different types. There's a whole bunch. Typically we think of inflammation as either acute or chronic. Well, there's actually 3 types. And you could look at those 3 types as being acute or chronic as well. But there's a neurogenic, and that's stress to the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system imbalance. And we talked about that for a whole hour last week. Again, I applaud those of you who are members. You can go back if you didn't get a chance to listen to that. That was the one on biofeedback, heart math, and I went on, and in fact I did listen to the affiliate program module, and that was a really good one. I love when I see something that I like, I'm going to tell somebody about it. And hey, there's nothing wrong with saying, and Dr. David's saying, hey, thanks a lot for telling other people about this. Here's a little bit of cash, and it can help offset your membership. So if you have to pay $27, it's still well worth it. But anyway, that's just my feelings about when you feel strongly enough about something, you're going to tell somebody about it. So let's move on with these different types of inflammation. There's neurogenic inflammation, which these are very common. You're going to recognize these: asthma, fibromyalgia, eczema, psoriasis, and migraines. These are considered neurogenic. And when you start to look at the process and it's kind of like a loop that the nervous system gets into, and it continues to occur, and it creates constriction of the airways, for example, in asthma, and it can constricts the muscles and fibromyalgia and creates a lot of joint-related problems, which leads us into our next one. It's a mechanical problem, joint and soft tissue dysfunction. These are major problems. Now, if a person has a mechanical problem that lasts for months or years, it's going to turn into the next one, and that's called a biochemical. They're also going to have a neurogenic, so their nervous system is going to get all wound up, their muscles are going to get tied up, the joints are going to dysfunction, and then eventually you're going to get these inflammatory free radicals that cause this pain, inflammation, and swelling. So that's why we see a lot of people that are just really, and the medications don't do much except for just help give us a little bit of relief. They really many times complicate the problem because they slow down the immune system's response to the inflammatory process. So when you start working people through the natural route, making sure that they're getting all those 5 things we talked about, getting good air, good water, getting good ratios of protein, carbohydrates, and fats, intelligent supplementation, and balancing the nervous system, we tend to have good results where a lot of times people are just, they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard spot. So the biochemical nutritional is the third one. So let me refresh if those of you are taking notes. 3 different types of inflammation: neurogenic, N-E-U-R-O, neurogenic. Then the next one is mechanical, and that includes joint, soft tissue dysfunction. And the third is biochemical or nutritional. And of course, that's what tonight's webinar was kind of focused on. By the way, there may be a few individuals that have joined us tomorrow afternoon. It's probably 3:45 right now, 3:30 in the afternoon in New Zealand. So we want to welcome our new friends from down under, and look forward to having you guys on more webinars. So we have deficiency problems, we have diet-related lifestyle problems, athletic oxidation problems that can lead to free radical stress, and that's where the biochemical nutritional thing comes in. So, all right, enough of that. And again, we'll provide those slides, and we'll get them to Dr. David. So how can we get a hold of something that helps us accelerate glutathione? Well, my kind of username, my general website is summyhealth.com. And if you have any questions, you can always email me at, and I forgot I didn't put this on there, I'll put it on the slide, but it's summyhealth@gmail.com, S-U-M-M-E-Y, for those of you who are just listening. summyhealth@gmail.com is my email. And so the summyhealth.maxgxl.com, this will basically take you to a product site only. No hype, just basically there are the glutathione accelerator. If you want to do more research, I'll provide you with more if you need that. But one of the things I would recommend is take that summyhealth.maxgxl.com and paste it into the top browser, not Google, because Google, you'll go onto my website. There's all kinds of things that you'll come across there, so just paste that into the top address bar. Now that's the end of this particular portion, and I'm just going to touch on about 3 or 4 other real quick slides. I'm just going to go through this real quick because I know we need to get to some questions. Is there a need? So you guys can either, type in yes or raise your hand or whatever, but is there a need for a webinar on the obesity epidemic? I know Dr. David asked me, what's with the kids now? My gosh, the kids are out of control. And I know the U.S. is still, at least 60% of the U.S. are overweight. I think it's over 35% now that are considered in that obese category. That means 30% body fat. So some of you know what leptins are, but if some of you don't know what leptins are, all the other hormones follow what leptins do, what leptin does, and so it's a critical role in this particular process. So just a couple of examples in the Journal of Obesity, they talk about this, and it's, again, relating back to this oxidative stress. I probably should have just left this in that bulk of the seminar, but I'm going to show you a little key slide. But it talks about the relationship between oxidative stress, obesity-induced oxidative stress, and these pro-oxidant influences. And so these symbols, you can look for the plus symbol and the minus symbol. The minus symbol represents a attenuation effect on oxidative stress. In other words, it helps it. The plus symbol is representing an increase in oxidative stress. And then the LOOH is the lipid hydroperoxides, which are very damaging to these fatty components in the cell membrane. So, and I'm not going to leave this up very long, but we know that, and a lot of people don't really realize that obesity is literally an inflammatory problem, but it's a problem that we see, and you can look at what's happening with the antioxidants, and we're going to talk just briefly in this next slide about these leptins. What are they? It's a hormone that fat cells make. It actually helps to give us the message, okay, you're done eating. And I think most of us on this call have, about an hour and a half later, you're starving. And that's because your leptins aren't listening. Your brain is actually becoming leptin resistant. And that's a big problem as sometimes our weight and sometimes our blood sugar starts to increase. And so, scientists thought if they gave more leptins, that would help them lose weight. And it actually, it's the problem. And so it's regulating leptins and actually getting the body to listen to and understand this communicating hormone. That's just a very critical one. And so part of the problem is that we are becoming more insulin resistant. We're becoming more leptin resistant. And so a lot of it is a timing thing. And there's tons of books out there on leptins if you want to do a little bit of research on that one. But give us some feedback and let us know if you think that there is a need for doing this obesity. So too much leptins obviously are bad news, and it creates this. It's actually a survival mechanism. You could have just eaten an hour and a half ago, but if your brain is not hearing the message, stop eating, your brain is literally saying, you are starving, you have to eat. And I think we've all found ourselves like, I don't know why I'm eating. But we found ourselves just kind of like pushing it in there. And as often as because there's some timing issues, and this leptin resistance literally sabotages these diet efforts. So it's a vicious cycle. So we really need to get it down, and a lot of that is that timing thing. So, but that would take some time to develop that. Also, interestingly enough, leptins can be used. This is in the Journal of Atherosclerosis. It actually increases the oxidative stress in endothelial cells. Those are the one cell thick layer that lines the arteries. And so when you start to get leptins reduced down, it actually helps the process of the immune system. Because if you have too much leptins, then you start getting too much fat, you start getting too much inflammation, and your immune system becomes suppressed, and there's some problems. So predicting these predictive markers, I think, are real important in helping to understand and kind of like tell you where you're at in that process. Like the scale is one thing, but you need to know what your percentage body fat is as well. Same thing with cholesterol. The number in itself doesn't mean anything. Knowing the HDL and LDL, it gives you the protective factors or the risk factors as well. So that's the last slide, and I'm going to turn this back over to Dr. David. Are you there, Dr. David?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Well, another excellent presentation as always, and thank you again for preparing this. This is really, folks, this is a really good overview of antioxidants, and then honing in on the master antioxidants, otherwise called glutathione. And thank you for highlighting all those new research articles that we're finding out about this antioxidant. And also for straightening out all the confusion about ORAC values and lipid soluble or water soluble, because people just get confused with all those things. So that's good. Yep. This is great. Thank you again.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, folks, questions? I'm going to do a quick change over here just to let those of you see my screen. Doc, keep your slide up, please. I'm going to send that back to you in a second. All right. Oops, I hope you can see my screen. Boy, this is not good. Can you see my screen? See this? Where is
I
Sherry?
think so.
Where is Sherry when you need her? Huh?
Oh, now there you go.
Okay. Thank you. Again, just to remind you folks, if you're new, these video recordings are available after the webinar. They are not going to be free. Only the live presentations are free. And the recordings are going to be available free for members. And we just want to remind you that we will be increasing the cost of our membership from March the 1st. So if you want to enjoy the benefits, again, it's a locked-in benefit. We will not increase the price if you join before then. And I think it's still got some really good deal. JC is going to be here tomorrow to speak about trehalose, very, very important sugar. And that's him there. Okay, I'm going to hand this back to Dr. Summey and then look at the questions that you have for him. Okay, let's see. All right, I'm just pulling this apart. And Doc, if you want to see the questions yourself, I don't know, you just prefer me to read them out?
Yeah, go ahead and do that. And then I just, for some reason, I'm trying to look at the, I see where it was just right at the very beginning, but there's only like the two or three questions, so I'm not looking at the right one, apparently.
You might have to, okay, well, you were not able to see the questions until now, so you should be an organizer right now. And then if you click on the questions box.
Oh, there we go.
Then you can pull it down. You can go to the edges and enlarge or make it wider so you can actually read all questions. Okay. Great. Someone says, great webinar. Thanks. Okay. Someone's asking, how does Manatech AO compare with Max GL ORAC value?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, it's kind of like the Ambertose formula has a 0 ORAC value. Well, that's not the reason why you would take that particular one. And so when you look at the same thing with, if you look at the product itself and you look at doing a test tube test on that, it itself doesn't do much. It's just like Ambertose doesn't do much. But when you put it in the body, then it can help to create that glutathione. And I don't know if there's been it's a good question. I don't know if there's been a study done on whether you could even do a study on that. I would imagine you can in terms of the oxygen radical absorption capacity. Because we know, and there is no question about this, that it is the number one. It's the best one out there. It's the master antioxidant. It itself becomes see, typically, if you take, let's say, a green tea, or you take a quercetin, or you take any of the other antioxidants that are in a particular product, and you put it in the body, and it becomes a weak free radical when it gives up its electrons. Glutathione doesn't do that. So that's the difference there, and again, we'll continue to pursue this question because I think it's an important one. I haven't seen any primers or any research on, just like you won't see any on the Ambertose as far as the ORAC value, because it itself doesn't have any, but it helps the body do some things that are pretty unique. And I know that there are some. Oh, sorry. I was just jumping on to the next one as far as medicinal values to mushroom. Yeah, cordyceps. That's a really good mushroom that helps protect the liver. Whenever you can protect the liver, oftentimes you can sustain glutathione levels, and so yeah. Okay, we got one good feedback on. There should be a webinar on obesity, and so. Yeah, I'm going to be providing slides for the inflammation part. I apologize for not having those ready. I don't know how many there are going to be. I mean, I've done I've done hours and hours of lectures on inflammation. We're not going to do that to you guys, but I think it's important that we include this process. I gave you a number of books on inflammation, like Dr. Fleming's Stop Inflammation Now, and also Dr. Barry Sears, the anti-inflammatory zone or anti-inflammation zone. Those are real important for you to start understanding the value of that. And so, okay, so with the Max GXL, is there an amount a person would need to start with? Does weight have anything to do with it? Yeah, it does. Typically they say, hey, start out with 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. That's what the research has shown to take those individuals up to a 300% increase in production. It's actually 294, I believe it was, the double-blind studies on glutathione, accelerated glutathione. So, but yeah, if a person's 280 pounds, they're probably going to need more, but that's up to the individual. Some people, again, just like other products we know, depends on what's going on. There's so many other factors. It depends on what their needs are. Depends on, in this case, what their oxidative stress is. Depends on what their age is. It depends on, what their lifestyle is like, and so on. So, okay. Somebody said, I really sleep good when I take 2 Aleve. Is that harmful? Well, again, it depends on how good your body is, particularly your liver, on detoxifying that medication. Every pharmaceutical has side effects, and we know that there's a number of books out that are called nutritionally induced pharmaceuticals, or nutrient depletion from drugs. And I know I'm not getting the name right, but you got the idea that every single pharmaceutical, because the body has got to take care of it, it's got to detoxify that drug and break it down and get rid of it. It goes through the stomach, obviously, and can create damage there. It goes into the liver, it does its job out in the body wherever you want it, whether it's a joint problem or a headache problem or whatever. But then it has to come back and get rid. Body got to get rid of it. You can't just continue to float that medication, or you're going to start building up toxic amounts. And that's exactly what happens with. That's what happened with those individuals that had a couple of glasses of wine and took maybe a little bit too much Tylenol. They depleted their glutathione and it killed them. So they had warnings out on TV. This is probably 6-8 years ago maybe. Do not drink alcohol with some of these medications. Probably a good idea not to drink alcohol with any medication, period, because your liver alcohol, we know, impairs liver function. And if a person's an alcoholic, they obviously know that there can be cirrhosis and permanent damage to the liver, to the point where you need a liver transplant. So yeah, that's a hard one to ask. There's so many factors involved, but I always tend to warn people. I just say, just be careful. Go take as few as you can to get by with. And if you're going to take medications, make sure you're protecting yourself. Make sure you've got good antioxidants in your system to protect your liver at least. Okay, so what's your opinion on the use of therapeutic hydrogen peroxide? I know that there are some individuals out there that actually do that. They'll use it in various ways in the body, and boy, you better have some good antioxidants if you're going to do that. I personally don't do that, and I probably wouldn't do that for my own self, but that's just me. There's some individuals that have researched it and said, yeah, it's a good way of being able to kill off a number of pathogens, because your body does produce hydrogen peroxide. You just better have some good antioxidants there to soak that up when your body starts to degrade it back into water and oxygen, because it'll do the job of what it's supposed to be doing. But then again, it's you're taking a potentially harmful substance in your body that can do some damage if you don't have a decent amount of antioxidants. How do you spell the mushroom? Cordyceps, C-O-R-D-E-C. There's a Y in there somewhere. C-Y-P-T-S. Cordyceps. There's a question about another mushroom. I don't know that particular one. Aricus. Please, can I see the second to last slide? It went back too fast. Well, I'm not sure. The second to last one, let's go down to the last one. There's the last one. There's the second to last one. Okay, Jan, if that's the one you want, then let me know. Okay. I'm getting a lot of questions about, I think we already took care of all those audio questions. And yep, I lectured about cellular communication for about 8 years, and Steve Nugent's a friend of mine, and so yes, absolutely. Boy, when you're working with a company and a product that works, stay with it. Stay with it, absolutely. I don't ever try and discourage people from, getting off of something that's working. I'm getting all these audios are great, so I think I've gotten to just about the end. David, do you see any more questions that? Yeah, there it is. Cordyceps, C-O-R-D-Y-C-E-P-T-S. Thank you, Richard, I believe that is. Cordyceps, C-O-R-D-Y-C-E-P-S.
All right. I still hear a lot of people saying thank you for a wonderful webinar. I learned a lot. It's a great resource. Great.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. Look forward to the obesity one. Not too soon because this one came really quick, and so I need a little bit of a rest. But I always enjoy these, and I just really appreciate you, David and Sherry, and we got a great team, and you got a good thing happening here. So, guys, get the word out there. I send it out, as you know. A lot of people are on this call. They're on my list. They're on my email list. And I'd rather get 2 or 3 notices than get none to miss something that I really wanted to hear or I should have heard, and I just didn't. So I really appreciate your diligence and your ability. I've got a couple of other guests in mind that can do a dynamite job that I need to talk with you about too, David. So thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, and thank Leslie as well for letting you off to do this.
She flew to Ontario. She's actually there now, so she probably is not on the call tonight. Usually she is. She's got to check my grammar, and all that. But so I had somebody substitute. Cecil is on. He's either going to listen to it tonight or he's going to. He's my speech coach, and I know I really massacred a whole bunch of words, and I know I talk very loud. So he's going to give me some feedback, and I'm going to take it in a good way, and we're going to continue to polish the presentation, because I tend to try and squeeze a lot of information into a short period of time, and sometimes I need to myself follow my own. Take a breath, slow down a little bit, enunciate a little bit better, and so I won't trip over my tongue so much.
Well, if it means anything, I think you don't go too fast. I think you go pretty at a very good pace that people can follow. But it's always good to have a speech coach as well. To help.
Yeah, and I would appreciate too anybody that has any feedback. I'm into constructive criticism, so feel free to email me and just give a little bit of a little friendly. Hey, if you could do this, slow this down, whatever. I know I do, and that's why I asked Cecil to listen to either tonight live or the recording, and so we're going to sit down and have a speech coach meeting. So anyway.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks again, Doc, and thank you, folks, for joining us, and we hopefully will see you tomorrow. God bless. Night.